Volleyball is probably the most progressive sport when it comes to rule changes. It feels like not a single season goes by without something in the so-called volleyball rulebook getting adjusted. And while a regular volleyball fan might think all these changes are pretty minor, professional teams find loopholes and try to squeeze the absolute maximum out of what may look like just a few changed letters. And today I want to talk about a rule that, in my opinion, doesn't get nearly enough attention from amateur players. A rule that, if changed even further in the future, could take the battle between the server and the passers to a completely different level. Some of you have probably already guessed that we're talking about player positioning on the court, which has to be respected. And over the last few years, this rule has gone through several small but very important changes. More specifically, we're talking about the positioning of the receiving team. In the past, it was strictly controlled that a back row player had to be farther away from the net than the front row player before the opponent served. Even if their feet were on the same line, it was considered a fault. Later, in the updated rulebook, it became allowed that if any part of the back row player's foot was level with any part of the front row player's foot, then it was no longer a fault. And basically, the back row player could already be significantly closer to the net. This rule was especially useful for setters. Now, with the receiving team being allowed to change position after the server tosses the ball, and with the upcoming international season, where they'll even be allowed to move after the server simply starts the serving motion, life becomes much easier for the receiving team. Let's be honest, you don't have to create unnecessary chaos anymore, and you can get to the right zones much faster and improve your combination play. But again, at the amateur level this just looks like a small simplification, while at the professional level it can seriously change the game. In professional volleyball, there has been a war between servers and passers for a long time, and considering that serving power keeps growing and growing, serve-receive also has to find ways to deal with that power, and most of the time it turns into a strategic battle. When the rules were a little stricter toward the receiving side, teams waiting for the serve used a trick where, after the opponent tossed the ball, they would slightly adjust their positions. Because the player serving the ball is already starting to focus on the ball and basically only remembers where the receivers were before the toss, especially if we're talking about a jump serve. Imagine this. You serve into what looks like an open zone, but to your surprise, a passer suddenly appears there. And while at the professional level this was completely normal, at the amateur level, even at a pretty high level, I still can't always explain to people why I constantly leave obvious open zones, even in the most dangerous areas. But the idea is simple. First, to make the opponent choose risky serving directions, which increases the chance of a serving error. And second, in most cases, to basically force them to serve at me. And very often with less aggression, because they rely more on accuracy than power, hoping to catch me off guard. But in reality, I often end up in a very favorable situation. And you might think that this is the advice I wanted to give in this video. But no. As I said, the rules change very often, and this whole season we've been living in a world where you can change your formation after the server tosses the ball. So yes, the advice about slightly changing position after the toss still makes sense, but there is something even cooler. Watching amateur players, I came to the conclusion that, unlike professional teams, almost nobody was using this advantage. What am I talking about? If before pro teams would only slightly adjust their positions in serve-receive, now they can simply switch places. This is especially relevant for back row players. And basically, you can put your best passer in the area where the opponent's serve is most likely to go. Or you can quickly switch positions, protect the player with the weakest passing in your team, or at least seriously reduce their area of responsibility. And right now, at the professional level, this is used everywhere. But for some reason, amateur players don't really use it. And no, the problem is not that amateur teams don't have players you can move around in serve-receive. Most of the time, it comes down to not knowing the rules, or not being able to interpret them correctly and use them to your advantage. And that's exactly why I am making this video, to show amateur players and teams that this is a really cool tool they can use. What pushed me to make this video were posts with tons of comments under different matches or stat sheets, where people were asking why teams serve so much at the libero. He's the best passer, so you're supposed to avoid him. But the problem is not that players serve at him. The problem is that he is the one who ends up where the serve is going. Most of the time, he is the one dictating the rules of the game. And yes, this story doesn't always work only one way, because servers can also understand that the receiving team can change positions and prepare a different strategy for that. So I completely disagree with those who say that because of rules like this, volleyball is becoming too casual and not the intellectual game we all fell in love with. But now this bottle of mines can reach a new level. As I said earlier, in the current international season, a rule will be tested where the receiving side can change its formation after the server only starts the serving motion. By the way, I recently talked about all the new changes that will be tested in a video on the channel, so definitely check it out if you haven't seen it yet. There's a lot of interesting stuff there. But let's get back to the positioning rule. For the vast majority of amateur players, this is just another small relaxation of the rules, but at the professional level it can change a lot. And in my opinion, this change will especially benefit players who use the float serve, which has been losing its value year after year. Just imagine, the server starts the approach, the receiver starts switching, but the player serving a floater also sees that movement and can change the decision at any moment, still find the weakest passer on the court, or simply catch the opponent while they're moving. You might think that before the toss on a jump serve, you can also see the opponent's receive formation changing, but nothing stops the receivers from switching positions again after the server tosses the ball. And honestly, I'm really looking forward to seeing how all of this affects the game. And while at the national team level we probably won't see too many tactical experiments, if this rule stays for the club season, that's where we might really see all the tactical depth of these seemingly small rule changes. Huge thanks to everyone who watched this video. I really hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. Make sure to write in the comments. Have you used these tactical details in serve receive before? Or are you going to start using them after watching this video? And as always, this was Nick. Love what you do and you will definitely succeed. See you soon, bye!